Hi there, and welcome to this Joy Sightings, edition number 30. Today I read from Tales of the Resistance by David and Karen Maines, the 6th chapter, which is entitled The Sewer Rat and the Boiler Brat. Deep beneath Enchanted City, great sewers rushed wastewater to treatment centers where sludge and gases were separated and then piped to the enormous boiler room for burning. Here, huge vats of boiling water spewed steam through underworld tubes, creating man-made power. Sewer rats and boiler brats, the orphans who manned this underworld, dreaded power outs more than cold, more than hunger, because then the merciless rage of the enchanter's men fell on them. The filthy drainage rushed through the great sewers. Sewer rat number 1 sniffed the air. He had lived in this underworld for so long he could smell a backed-up drain a mile away. In the dark, he inched along the narrow walkway above the reeking wastewater, heading for Drain 75S. "Achooey!" he sneezed. He had been a sewer rat ever since he could remember, and he always had a cold. Boiler Brat, his best and only friend, talked of up there. Up there were city lights and warm fires and mothers and fathers. Sewer rat number 1 had no memory of up there. His forever memory was of the dark and the damp. He thought he had never really been warm. Achooey! As far as he knew, his mother was the rank sewer and his father was the sound of rushing wastewater. Shlooshu. The only memory that was not of down here was the sound of a lone, clear note haunting to sewer rat number 1. He couldn't remember the rest of the tune, and he didn't know where it came from, just one note sounding from far, far away. "Dis here's the drain," he shouted into the cavern of the huge sewer pipe. "Ayo, sewer rats, dis here's the drain. 75 south. Ayo, sewer rats, drain 75 south." Other boys and girls crept through the darkness, all miserable sewer rats like himself, orphans taken into the enchanter's custody at their parents' deaths, with no one to love them, no one to protect them, no one to make them wash. They were dirty-faced, ragged, ill-mannered, and snotty-nosed. Some rats inched cautiously along the walkways, newcomers who remembered up there. Others ran with confident abandon, their bare feet and hands acting like suctions against the damp, dripping sewer walls or on the network of treatment pipes that crisscrossed the stinking hollow of the underworld cavern. Sewer rat number 1 shouted orders. "Lower 'em down dere now! Don't swallow nothin'! Hurry 'em up, you sewer rats!" 3 boys and 2 girls holding grappling hooks were lowered by others into the wretched waters. Sewer rat number 1 scrambled to turn the huge valve that shut the drain. No use losing good workers in the suck-up, the powerful rush of waters that occurred once the drain was unclogged. After a few moments, the 5 broke the surface, gasping for breath. Instantly, 5 others dived in. "Hey-ya, hey-ya!" cried sewer rat number 1. "Dat blasted siren's gonna go! Den we got the breakers on our backs!" Suddenly, an awful wailing shriek began. The sound of it bombarded the sewer caverns, violently sloshing the wastewater. A bubble trap, a giant air pocket, had formed during the hasty opening and closing of the main valve. Now the steam in the boiler room would shut down, and all Enchanted City would plunge into darkness. A little girl beside sewer rat number 1 screamed, "Power out! Power out! Oh, they'll get us now! Now we'll get it!" Sewer rat number 1 hushed her. Rat number 72 was really too small to be down here. She hadn't even undergone branding. But little rats could climb into minor clogged pipes and drains. He took her hand as she cried and roughly swinged her to his shoulder. "Well, rats, we's in for it. All of yous follow me." His voice could hardly be heard above the siren wail. With heavy hearts, sewer rats dropped from the pipes to which they had climbed, their bare feet padding against the wet walkways. "Oh," the little girl moaned, clutching sewer rat number 1's head. "Shut your mouth," he whispered gruffly. He knew her crying would incite the breakers. The children gathered in the boiler room. The angry maws of the furnace doors were open, waiting for more fuel, but the great grim boilers were beginning to sputter and spout, shutting down because of the bubble trap. Boiler brats were throwing down their sludge shovels and taking off their hard hats. With dread, they watched breakers already slipping around the iron cauldrons of the maze of blast pipes. These grim shadows crept silently into the darkening power station. The children all knew that there was no one who could keep them safe. Sewer rat sniffed death. These were the No People who had given themselves to the enchanter, and now they had no minds but to do the work of the evil ruler. In the dim light, their chalky white faces set off piercing black eyes full of malice. In their folded arms, all held cudgels, brutal clubs with ugly knobs. The huge boilers gurgled and bubbled hopelessly as one by one they shut down. "Mama! Mama!" wept the little child very quietly. "Full-scale power out, flumba," said a boy wearing a suit of heat's ease, flimsy metal-like material that sometimes shielded brats from fire and steam. "Oh, flumba! Somebody's gonna get it." It was boiler brat number 1, sewer rat number 1's friend, and these two felt responsible for all the other children. "Ayo, somebody's gonna get broke if someone don't do something fast." "You gonna pop the bubble?" Boiler Brat challenged. Popping the bubble. It meant diving down to the drain with the valve open, finding the air pocket, piercing it, and hanging on for dear life as swooshing wastewater exploded through the open drain. Swimming back was sure doom. A popper could only hope by claw or by gnaw to catch the next downpipe drain. One rat had survived popping, but he was pretty blasted, and he swallowed so much filthy water that he later died of sewer poisoning. Suddenly, the boiler room was filled with fiery light. The enchanter himself had emerged from an opening. His herald's voice cried, "The fire wizard, lord of the death drums, god of the fire priests, commander of the burners and breakers and naysayers." The children, sewer rats and boiler brats, edged toward the walls and tried to sneak behind pipes, only to be pushed back by the brutal clubs of the breakers. In a rage, the enchanter was hot to the touch. Those who came too close could be scorched. Obviously infuriated, the man who loved fire lifted his red head and screamed one heart-stopping shriek that pierced the very soul of all the children. "Ay, ay, 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 ay! Power outs, power outs! How many times do I have to tell you that power outs are forbidden in my kingdom? Someone's gonna pay for this. Someone's gonna pay plenty." Opening his hands, his fingers shot flames. The rats and the brats cringed. By now the enchanter was surrounded by his personal bodyguards, the burners, their pokers flashing in the half-dark. "Oh!" wailed a little voice. Number 72 was overcome with terror. "Oh!" her voice cried, getting louder and louder. "Oh!" "Silence!" shouted the enchanter. His voice boomeranged in the blast room. His flashing eyes were malignant. "Who dares interrupt me?" Sewer rat number 1 knew it was useless to explain that the noise was just one frightened little girl, who in all Enchanted City cared about the trauma of an orphan child. "Bring the offender here," commanded the enchanter. Instantly Berners moved toward the whale. A breaker raised a cudgel and jammed it against number 72. She screamed in pain and fell in a clump. Roughly, Berners dragged her limp body to the enchanter. "Somebody's got to do something," whispered Boiler Brat number 1. "Silence!" shouted the enchanter again, and all obeyed. Even number 72 was silent. She had fainted in fear. The tall fire wizard's voice grew sinister. "Aha! I think I have a solution. Firing! Firing for 5. Who will walk through the flames? Any volunteers? Here's the first." He pointed to the child at his feet and laughed. "Oh, ho, 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 oh, ho, ho." Suddenly, Sewer Rat number 1 sneezed. "Achooey!" The enchanter looked at him through narrowed eyelids. "Ah, Sewer Rat number 1! Are you volunteer number 2? Sewer Rat number 1 swallowed hard. He took one step forward. "Actually, sire, how's about poppin'?" A yellow light shone in the wizard's eyes, and the pokers in the hands of the Berners flashed brighter. "Ah, yes, popping. Any suggestions? Who's the lucky popper?" Sewer Rat number 1 sneezed again and pointed to himself. Sire, I's the man for the job. No need of firin'. Right, sire?" The enchanter raised his head and laughed. He laughed and laughed, sounding like a hyena howling over its prey. "Oh, ho, ho, ho!" He stopped. "Oh, heroics! I love heroics! Why, of course, Sewer Rat number 1, be hero of the day. Just get that bubble trap out of the drain. I don't care if number 1 or number 101 dies doing it." With that, a signal was given. The Berners surrounded the enchanter and exited from the room, taking the fiery light with them. The breakers kept guard, holding the sewer rats and boiler brats hostage to number 1's intent, and the children huddled in a relieved panic in the dim shadows of the boiler room. "Suey," Boiler Brat whispered, "how's you gonna come out in one piece?" Sweat ran down his forehead. "Dunno, but that bubble's gotta pop." Sewer Rat number 1 opened the valve for drain 75S. "Dis here's the last dive, the last moments." He shuddered as he thought of popping. He shuddered again as he thought about firing, about hostages forced to walk through the flames. And he was glad that number 72 would be safe for a little while longer. But he would never see up there. What's up there, he wondered. This underworld is bad, dark, and cold. Is up there good, bright, and warm? Fear made number 1 shiver all over. He sniffed the air. No one was near. He was glad that the other rats were held hostage and that no one could see him shaking. Boily was good. "My friend Boiler Brat." Sewer Rat number 1 took a deep breath, lowered his head, prepared to plunge. Then suddenly he smelled something. Sewer Rat looked up. A soft glow filled the end of the tunnel beyond drain 75S. Berners? No, but a man. A stranger stood in the warm light. Number 1 thought he heard a note sounding from far away, clear, strong, and haunting. The stranger called, "What are you doing, number 1? He was standing on the walkway on the other side of the sewer tunnel. "Poppin'." Risky business." "Power outs. Wizards fired up. You know what that means. Firing? Ayo. Then sewer rat number 1 sneezed. Achooey! The man said, In the kingdom of light, it's always right. And the one note seemed louder. A kingdom? Asked number 1. His heart was beating rapidly. Yes, a kingdom where the king is good and all the people live up there, and where every orphan belongs to somebody. Don't believe it. The stranger started to hum the same one note, then he stopped. Don't pop. Sewer rat protested. But firing. Close the drain valve. Stack rocks from the sewer siding in the drain chute. Open the drain. The suck-up will force the rocks through the bubble trap. The enchanter himself knows how popping can be done with no risk to life. Sewer rat number 1 looked at the stranger in amazement. Could this be true? He struggled to shut the valve. He grunted and pulled the heavy rocks from the siding across the work platform above Drain 75S. They tumbled down the chute and smashed against the closed system. He rushed to the valve and strained to open it. A splash, a tumbling moan in the pipes, then a bursting pop, followed by a whooshing, turbulent swooshing of wastewater. It worked. Number 1 scrambled across the network of tubes to the other side. He wanted to see this stranger up close. He wanted to be near his light. He wanted to be warm. How yo know about this? The stranger smiled. I know much more. I care who dies, or who is afraid, or who is weeping, or who is without love. The radiance from the stranger folded sewer rat number 1 in warmth. You know this note? I know the whole song. Come follow me up there, and I will teach you the rest of the tune. Number 1 hung his head. There was nothing in the world he wanted more than to leave this terrible underworld, to walk in the warmth of the light of this strange and wonderful stranger, to learn the rest of the notes of the one note that haunted his memory. But, the stranger asked. But? Sewer rat looked up into the eyes of the man. But, Boily, my friend, and number 72, and all the rats and brats. Come with me, said the stranger, and the rat did. Together they climbed through the sewer underworld, over causeways and walkways and crisscross networks of pipes. The whole way the one note sounded above their heads, calling, calling. They came to the boiler room. The great vats had begun to heat, churning and bubbling and steaming. The breakers had all gone, and the boiler brats were shoveling sludge again. The sewer rats sat in a sad circle, their heads hanging. None could bear to discover what had happened to number 1. "Suey!" cried boiler brat number 1 when he saw his friend. "You popped!" All the other children cheered and clapped. Number 72 ran to his side and embraced him with her hug. "Nah, not me." He stuttered and pointed to the stranger. "Him, he—" It was then that the children really saw the stranger, and the one-note hum entered into the heart of each orphan child, no matter how dirty or ugly. Each thought, "He's like my father, or my favorite older brother, or my best friend." And none knew that this was the thought of all the others. They all wondered, "I've heard that song, but what's the rest of the tune?" The boiler room, filled with ash piles and grime and mounds of furnace clinkers, was flooded with the stranger's soft light. For the first time, the sewer rats and the boiler brats saw how dirty they were, how ragged and how forlorn. They wanted to be clean and to sleep in warm places and to have someone fuss over them and bring them good food. "Come follow me," the stranger called. Hum the one note you know, and I will teach you the rest of the music." And the children hummed, the big tough boys and the rough girls and the tiny ones too young for branding. "Hmm." "What about them breakers?" Boiler Brat asked. But the stranger only smiled and hummed the note louder. And somehow they knew they would be safe with him. Sewer Rat number 1 put his arm around his friend Boiler Brat, and they all, every last one, followed the stranger out of the dark underworld. And they marched after the man who reminded them all of their fathers, and they hummed the call of the one-tone tune, out of the fetid underworld and the dangerous blast room, through the city where all the people stared, past the ashes of burning place, over the garbage heap, to a strange old gate, and into a park where trees grew. And no one stopped them because the stranger led them, and they would have followed farther, farther, in order to be close to the only one who cared about tired, lost, cold, hungry, and unhappy orphans.